would just like to ask if anyone has any questions for Francesco.
First of all, did you understand what a tree bank is now?
Yes, I think much better.
Great.
Bank being more like data bank of these tree structures.
I didn't mean to make an example.
Yes.
Just
some humble, low-level question.
Of course.
All right. First, chunking. You said, well, we don't have to do the chunking because we already have edited texts and digital editions. And I would say lucky you, but in a way, if you really want to describe what linguistic tools can do for Greek, isn't that a little bit cheating somehow? Or do you just take these edited texts as standard and everything?
Oh yeah. First off, sometimes you can run into all kinds of problems. Like for example, if you just segment a text using the usual standard technique for linguistic annotation, you will find that sometimes these traditional divisions that you have and are reported in many digital editions, like for example the one in Perseus Project in the TEI, and represented with the use of TEI standards, you will find that these divisions were not made using linguistic criteria. So, example, choral poetry. They are divided in stanzas. And sometimes you see that the sentence overlap one stanza and go to the other. If you use this chunking, you will find really a chunk of a sentence that doesn't make any sense, because what makes this sentence to have sense is in the other chunk, is in the other stanza. And this is, a big problem. Most of the time, these problems can be in any way, but I suspect, correct me if I'm wrong, that your question had also to deal with the fact that if you work with digital editions that are already somehow chunked using often modern edition as standard, so the division in chapters, paragraphs and so on, that is, or even the numeration of the chapters, paragraphs and so on, that is provided into some modern edition, then you limit yourself and you only reproduce a modern edition, and which is of course one interpretation of what the text can be, and you don't take into account what I mentioned before, the disagreement of the text itself. Yes, this is a big problem, but I suspect that, but this problem is so big that it's really at lays at the foundation of every kind of work in corpus linguistics for the ancient in the field of classics. We would love to represent also the three-dimensional nature of this corpus. It's not only a chain of sentences, chain of words, but it's also a chain of words that has an history. We don't know how to do that. Homer multitext is very interesting in this from this perspective, but again, we should integrate the linguistic part into this, and we are not quite ready to do that yet. So we should limit ourselves to this fictionary scenario where the text does not make any problem. In the case of Thucydides, well, okay, don't let any classical philologists hear that, but okay, we can agree at least on the most part.
Okay, and in your XML example of a sentence,
okay, it's in the very foolishly I closed the presentation.
There is one word, the first word is repeated. Is it because it has two different relations, or what's the point?
No. In this case, it's because it's twice in the text.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's this is a part of this is Aeschylus, it's not Thucydides, and it says basically the mournful song saying, but it's really repeated. It's poetry.
Okay. And you had these examples with the ambassadors of the Spartans and Athenians not being harmed by the other side, or not being judged by the other side, and you added the other side. So my question is somehow maybe a naive question: where does it stop? You could also divide the two ambassadors into two people, and one person is not harmed by one side and one is not harmed by the other side.
Yes, we may, but a good way to stop is the kind of process that first of all, is your question finished? I think that before I just ran into answering you before I let you finish, because I was very eager to. But okay, one way to stop, as you say, is to just make some very basic linguistic thinking. As I said, this adverb here is clearly derived by a verb, which means press, charge, against. If you look at the structure of a verb like press, charge, against, you again think it logically, and there are, as I said, some way of some linguistic tests that you can make to see if the sentence makes sense or not. There are some information that need to be there. Somebody who press charge against, somebody who does the action of pressing charge, somebody who is the victim or is the target of these charges, and some charge that is pressed. That may be expressed or maybe not. We can discuss about that. But if you look at, even if you go to a dictionary like the Little Scott, the Greek-English lexicon, that's standard for Greek language, and you see actual example in use of this verb, you see that you find this kind of these arguments, and then afterwards you can go and see other translations of this kind of verb. Go to semantic frames, like in the Heidelberg example of verbs of this kind, that means make accusation against somebody, and you will see that you get the structure. So it's somehow arbitrary, but it is not. You come up with the conclusion that you record in the valency lexicon, as I said, that this kind of verb requires at least 3 arguments that should be there. And these 3 arguments are those. And then you can go and annotate this. You won't need to add the fact that maybe a person is targeted and not the other, and so to divide the information, because you just remain at this basic level of information and of meaning that you come up with because you did some linguistic thinking. So it's somehow arbitrary, because I can say that maybe we can discuss, maybe it is not so mandatory to have an argument like that, the charges that are pressed. We can just say, I press charges against you. But, well, maybe it's just even because we are reasoning in translation, but in this case, the Greek verb really needs, according to me, a mention or an argument of some accusation that can be made. Maybe this kind of information, okay, because if it is not obligatory, if it's not required by the meaning, I leave that out. That can be there. Like if I say, I press charge against you in the tribunal, but in the part in the tribunal can be completely left out without the sentence becoming unintelligible, with the sentence just staying over there with the same meaning. It's just a circumstantial more that I add in the speech that I press accusation in a specific tribunal. But if I decide that this argument, the kind of accusation that are actually pressed against the person, then I have to add this note. And I record. If I didn't do that, I will do that later. I record in the valency lexicon that for me this argument is required.
Any other questions? I suppose I have a question. I'm just thinking about the kind of ancient Egyptian data that I work on, or I should say other colleagues I work on, very early fragmentary material that does not involve continuous expression of continuous language, but certainly for a lot of the epigraphic epigraphic and haplological data that we deal with, it's often fragmentary. Now you've talked about how words or lexical items that are, how you're dealing with those that are left out, that they might be absent because they're implied through context elsewhere. But what if they're absent due to actual physical transformations of the document? Is this treebanking system able to cope with some of those less linguistic features, but which nevertheless impact on linguistic relationships and interpretation?
That is a very, very good and important question. Typically not. Let's keep in mind that this model, that the treebanking was invented in order to study modern languages, or especially to work, or even this kind of annotation, the tectogrammatical representation was made to come with a better machine translation, an automatic translation of modern language. Because this level, of course, is supposed to give you a more abstract insight into a language. So tree banks were typically made of articles, and the first tree bank it was made of journal articles from the Wall Street Journal, something which typically doesn't come in fragments or or with philological problems of integration. So no, the model is to be invented. I should say that, though, if we find a way, we should probably look at other models, which are the model tree banks that are nowadays quite widespread, of oral productions. So orally produced sentences, because in oral speech, like take my speech for example, you got a lot of interruptions and a lot of sentences that are left there vaguely and not filled with materials. Or sometimes if you work, for example, on telephone conversations, something is unintelligible. Most often you don't hear. You cannot annotate a word because you actually don't hear it, and you say okay, there's something that is inaudible over here. And so maybe we can look at what people do with this kind of problems. I should say that, though, if we can find a way to signal at, well, let's see, to signal here, here, we got lacuna, we got something that is missing, like I don't know, an abstract sign that says something is missing because it's not legible in the document. Then we can deal with what there is in the text and say, okay, linguistically, as I said before, semantically, this kind of information must be integrated. Like if there was just to relate to this example that is particularly dear today to me, like if there is a word of giving, maybe in this part, in this lacuna that is missing, some of the arguments that are semantically required are there. Statistically, maybe you go to the other occurrences of your word in the corpus and say, look, most of the time this verb is realized with this particular argument there. So we can say that statistically in this lacuna, if all the other if the statues of the text allow you the space that is and the length of the word is enough or something like that, allows you to make this kind of conclusion, maybe statistically our corpus say that we need this, that we need this argument to be realized. So the dot is a square just because linguistically I'm doing what we read, but it may be not square but round because it can be that the word that we are integrated, it's not to be implied from the context, but it's actually there in the text, but it's not legible. We don't have any tool to deal with this kind of problem, but it is high on top of the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. All right, any final questions? All right. Well, let's just go ahead and thank Francesco again for a
Thank you.